So look, I know the Vikings lost Dalvin Cook, and from a roster perspective, that figures to make their run game worse. But there's some other stuff that they're adding that might make it better. Let's go through it on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Luke Braun. Let's find some joy today. You can find the Locked On Vikings podcast wherever you find your favorite shows, whether it is a regular audio platform. We're on all of those, as well as YouTube, even Amazon Fire or Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. And a special shout out to those of you who do listen to this show every single day. You guys are the lifeblood of this show. Cannot thank you enough. Shout off if you can. Hashtag everydayers. On this episode of Locked On Vikings podcast, I'm going to do an X's and O's thing I've kind of been promising for a little while. And it's going to be a lot about what are the Vikings doing on offense. The Vikings were, I think everybody can kind of agree, not really 13-4, right? They won 13 games, and that's great. But anybody expecting them to run back the exact same thing and repeat that same result, I don't think that. I think we all understand that that's not going to happen, right? And so, what have they changed to kind of try to replicate that success and find their way back into the playoffs, win the division again, back-to-back years for the first time since 2009? That's the goal, right? Or at least one of the goals. The goal before we get to the real goal, a prerequisite to the goal. And I think one of the key things that I've been talking about is the Shanahan pill stuff. And I've talked a little bit about it, but I haven't really been able to get into the specifics that I want to get into because news keeps breaking. So let me get into that. We have a minute here where we can really go deep on the Vikings run game. So consider this your guide to the new parts of the Vikings run game. Now, I think a little bit of a prerequisite to this episode is the one a couple weeks ago, which is just how modern NFL run games work, how modern NFL run games, which are basically zone run games, tend to work, how running backs have to read it, how the blocking schemes are set up. It's a little bit more of a 101 thing. Go listen to that one if you're not familiar, like if I say something like a combo block or if I say reach block or something like that. If you don't know what those words mean, that episode will help you a little bit, but for more of a 201 course, I guess, is where we're going to go into here. And there's a specific play that I think the Vikings are going to make a lot of use of. And there's a reason to be excited about, but first, basically we did zone blocking rules. The Vikings like to do outside zone or mid zone, to the weak side. They're probably going to do a little bit less of like the samey runs. They like to run the same kind of play over and over and over again, as a way of kind of setting up play action. And so it had to be kind of really samey so that when you are setting up a play action off it, they're like, oh, this is the run we've seen a million times, right? They're going to still do that. I mean, outside zone weak is in every NFL playbook. Outside zone strong, every NFL playbook. That's just like a staple. But what I really want to talk about is the new stuff that layers on top of that. And this is going to be the point of signing someone like Josh Oliver. Oliver in particular is really important for this, and CJ Ham is really important for this. And being able to do it with both of these guys and interchange them depending on how the other team approaches 21 personnel versus 12 personnel, because some defenses are going to have different strategies for each, and you can kind of pick your poison there. Having both of those options is going to be really important, even if you go a whole month and you use CJ Ham but not Josh Oliver the whole time. Having both of those tools in your toolbox is going to be really important. So let me go all the way to like the most granular level. I want you to think about it as an outside run play, outside zone run play. If you think about, let's say you just have the crappiest blockers in the world and everybody's going to lose. Which defender becomes the one you want to pay the most attention to in that scenario? Which defender becomes the one that you're going to be the most annoyed with if everybody loses their blocks all the time? Or maybe a better way to ask that question is, which blocker on outside zone can you least afford to screw up the block? Or which defender can you least afford to screw the block up on? To me, my answer to that is probably going to be the edge rusher, the Danielle Hunter. If you run outside zone Danielle Hunter's way, I want to make sure Danielle Hunter is the most taken care of. You got the big boys up front, right? Those guys, if you're running straight at them, you're going to need to take care of them. But this is outside zone. So those guys are going to have to do a lot of run and chase. And hey, if they beat their one-on-one and they go make the play in the backfield, bless them. But I'm going to kind of bank on that not being something that happens nearly as often as what would happen if we can't handle the edge rusher. That dude's making the play every single time, no matter what. We're running right at him, right? The aiming point of the running back is at the tackle. So that tackle cannot just get smoked, right? So let's put a double team on that. And let's just make sure that that is set up. So this is a big thesis of like outside zone strong side toward the tight end. Let's just get that particular block shored up. Everything else can be one-on-ones for the most part. If we just make sure, we're double teaming your Myles Garrett, your Joey Bosa, right? Your whoever it's going to be. And making sure that those guys have as much help as we need so we can just eliminate that guy. However, that brings its own problems into the play, right? If we're running toward the tight end, well, guess what comes over to the strong side of the play as well? A strong side linebacker, or maybe even a nickel corner, or maybe a safety rolls down. When you run to the side with more blockers, there's going to be more defenders, right? That's why when we do like box counts, we shouldn't think of 6-man, 7-man, 8-man boxes. We should think of +1 and -1. When you're trying to figure out, did they put an extra guy in the box? Do they have one more guy in the box than we have blockers? Versus, because if we have 8 blockers and they have 8 defenders, that's actually a situation that favors the offense. So whenever you see 6-man, 7-man, 8-man boxes, that's completely useless data. That's formational data, and it tells you more about the offensive strategy than like a running back or whatever if you're trying to do like a fantasy thing. So if we are going toward a side of the run where there's more players, right? That means more blocks are going up, which means more opportunities for someone to screw up, more dudes that can fail, points of failure. So we have to kind of fix this problem, right? We have brought a linebacker over and we're using the tight end to double the edge rusher, right? We now have the tackle. So call it Brian O'Neill. Let's say this is a right-handed run. Brian O'Neill, or Blake Brandel, I guess, until O'Neill is healthy. Maybe Vidarian Lowe. We'll see if he gets a chance. And then TJ Hawkinson, right? Brandel and Hawkinson, they're going to double team your edge rusher. Okay. So now we have brought the linebacker whose job is to line up over the tight end, is now not being blocked by the tight end. So who handles him? This is where Zorro comes in, right? For regular outside zone, the answer to that question is usually it's TJ Hawkinson, and he won't fully double team the edge rusher. He'll sort of put an arm into the edge rusher and then climb up to the linebacker. We call that a combo block. There's a lot of different names for it, but we'll call it combo block for now. So with this new addition, we don't need to ask TJ Hawkinson to do that. We don't need him to get up and not only help out our tackle on the edge rusher, but also get up and get the linebacker. We can get another person in the fold, basically. And we'll line him up on the backside of the formation. This is going to be where you hear about CJ Ham is lining up at like tight end and motioning across the formation. This is what they're rehearsing. If you hear about like a wide receiver coming across, can maybe be that guy. Somebody comes from the other side of the formation, and then he'll lead block. And so then the aiming point of the running back also gets pushed outside a little bit further. He is now no longer going at the tackle where, there might be a Joey Bosa. He's following the lead block. If that's CJ Ham or that's Josh Oliver. Now those guys need to get out into space, find that strong side linebacker who is basically unblocked and free and is only in the play because we put the tight end in the first place, and get him. Now, again, we have introduced the same problem. You have somebody coming over from one side of the formation to the other. That is going to bring a defender from one side of the formation to the other. Or maybe that brings a safety down or a corner. Whatever it is, there be folks. But that's a way easier problem to solve. If that's a safety coming down all the way, he's the deepest dude. By the time he makes the play, we might be okay with that, right? He makes the play, but it's already a 5-6 yard gain. That's fine. We're not trying to draw every play up to be a touchdown. We're just trying to get like profits here, right? Or maybe it's a corner, and you can have your wide receiver say, well, if that corner is going to get in the fit, now I'm getting into the run play. And now, we keep our numbers advantage that way. So depending on who comes in, you can kind of have read and react for that, you give everybody a specific instruction. But either way, that's a more favorable situation than I've got to tackle one-on-one on the edge rusher. Good luck. That's the point of this outside zone play. And the name for it in the Shanahan offense is Zorro. I don't know if the Vikings will use the same name, but that's going to be like what you would hear in the actual huddle is like Zorro left from this formation, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of other information in play call. I should go over that someday. But that's kind of the way to do it. So with that as a foundation, now let's talk about how the defenses will sort of attack that and how to counter what the defenses will try to do and how that works. And also, I think it's really important when we talk about a specific Vikings play to talk about the play action that comes off of that play. When we talk about a run play, we have to talk about its pass sister play. So we'll get into all of that. But before I do so, I don't want to get too deep into this before talking to you about the lovely sponsor of today's episode, which is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And they're America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. And that's because if you are new to Grambling and you want to get signed up, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and you can get a no sweat first bet. That means if you whiff on your first bet, you can get up to $2,500, $2,500 back in bonus bets if you whiff on that first bet. Maybe you bet like that Carlos Correa would get a home run, and then you whiffed on that. Seems to be a thing that happens sometimes. Please do not clip me and post that next time Carlos Correa gets a home run. But if you whiff on that, you could get up to $2,500 back in bonus bets if that is your first bet. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That app is safe, secure, and very easy to use. FanDuel pays out instantly when you win, and there's all kinds of great promotions going on all the time. So check back at FanDuel.com periodically. But if you're new, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and claim that no sweat first bet at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Thank you all so much for those of you who do listen to the show every single day. My hashtag every day is especially in the summer. I hope I am rewarding that loyalty with some good evergreen kind of there's nothing pressing that we must talk about, so we can talk about whatever we want. I hope I'm rewarding that loyalty with something you find at least a little interesting. If you want more like that, you can check out patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. I'll have video breakdowns with this same kind of level of detail on a lot of things, and a lot of the stuff on there is free to watch. You don't even have to join, but of course, I would always appreciate it. So to really understand how this stuff that the Vikings are sort of leaning towards is working, I think you have to first understand a little bit about defensive like run fits, and we're not going to go crazy deep into it, but basically a modern NFL run fit, the spine of it is pretty simple. It's what you'd see in Madden. Everybody's got a gap that they're responsible for, and you go get the A gap, you get the B gap, and so on. And for those of you who don't know, the A gap is the gap between the center and guard. So there'll be an A gap on either side of the center, if you follow me. The B gap is the next one over. It's between the guard and tackle, and then the C gap is between the tackle and tight end, or a ghost tight end. If there isn't one, you still kind of imagine there is, and then the D gap is on the outside of the tight end, right? That's typically how these things are like calculated. And so you'll say, I have the C gap, right? I have the D gap, I have the B gap. And it's a little more complicated than that too. Like that would be in and of itself a difficult system to get like 8 guys all on the same page and make sure nobody's taking the same gap and nobody's leaving a gap open, right? But then you have, well, I'm supposed to take the outside shoulder. I'm supposed to take the inside shoulder. Some guys are just meant to deconstruct a guy. Sometimes it's not just about I'm in this gap, and if the run comes my way, it's my job to tackle them. Sometimes it's, all right, I'm in my gap. I've got my guy. I'm going to kind of shift my helmet out so that the running back sees my helmet outside of the blocker's helmet. And if the running back sees that, he'll want to cut the run back inside, and then that's how I get him. I'm going to lure him into my gap, and then I'll do it. And that's the job sometimes. And in a way, you can kind of be an outside contain guy while also being responsible for the next gap in, and you can kind of get a guy back that way. There's all kinds of other stuff. We don't need to go into crazy detail about it, but all you need to understand is that it's like a pretty complicated system. There's a lot of moving parts to a run fit, and whenever you see a breakaway run that's explosive, maybe even a touchdown, a lot of times it's because somebody either didn't get over to their gap, or a lot of times it's because someone screwed up that system. And so as an offense, when you're trying to counter those solutions, so as an offense, part of scheme is making that system as complicated and easy to screw up as possible. You want to make the defense's thing really hard to communicate and execute properly, right? And if they do it all properly and they get it, all right, great, they did it, right? But make it hard. And a lot of offense is not necessarily make it like a perfect thing that gets a touchdown every time. It's just make it hard for them to do it right. And if they can do it right, then bless them, but make it hard. So when you add and insert other players into the fit, and there's even a run play the Dolphins would use that's like an insert zone where you'd have a lead blocker, but instead of coming all the way outside, it's an inside run, and now they're the ones kind of blocking up the middle. Now suddenly what was the A gap just became 2 A gaps. Okay, now whose job is what? Or in this Zorro play, you will have somebody come across the formation. You've got a tight end, so you have your C gap and your D gap, and everybody who's responsible for each thing. Now another guy came, so you have like an E gap or something like that. And when another guy enters the equation, so think of the quote unquote D gap, which would be between like the outside shoulder of the tight end and forever the sideline, right? Like that whole space is, call it the D gap, but it's the outside, right? And you have a player who is responsible for the outside, who is now sees a lead blocker coming across. They see Josh Oliver coming at them, and they'll say, okay, now I've got that guy, right? Now that's the matchup, and I need to win the outside shoulder of the lead blocker because this run can't come outside. My job is the run can't come outside. Well, now suddenly you have a double-teamed edge rusher, and you have the strong side linebacker. That might be his job. The strong side linebacker has now done his job, and he's played outside. He just did everything right. If you're visualizing this, or maybe draw it out if you have to, you maybe have noticed that there is a problem, that edge rusher can't make the play. If the running back cuts inside where that strong side linebacker was, then there's a huge gap there, right? You've created a new gap. You've taken that D gap, which is outside shoulder from the tight end to the sideline, and turned it into 2 gaps. Now it's tight end to the new lead blocker, and then lead blocker to the sideline, and you only got one guy covering that. So how do we handle that? We got to bring the safety down. And then if you really want to do the gigabrain thing, you'll add CJ Ham behind Josh Oliver. You use both of them, 22 personnel. Let's get big, right? So the safety comes down, and now, we do it again. Now we split that gap again, and we're cutting these things in half, adding more layers of complexity. And even if they do have, theoretically, on the whiteboard, they have enough guys for everybody to do everything, every single one of those instances is a chance for the defense to screw it up. And that's really a part of this thesis. Is, you've got guys motioning across. The other thing is you can dictate matchups. There's a split zone version of this run. I don't know the name for it in the Shanahan system. Some people call it slice, but we'll call it split zone. That's what most people know it as, where it is an outside zone run one way, and the tight end so it's like outside zone to the strong side, but the tight end is coming against the grain. So he's coming to the backside of the formation and blocking like a pursuing edge rusher or something like that, right? When you do that, but you also do the strong lead thing, you will have one guy pre-snap motion across the formation, and then another guy pull the other way across the formation, which means you've now taken whatever the box count, the hat count numbers are, right? The defense will always be doing this, but they'll be saying how many blockers are on the left, how many blockers are on the right. Is our math correct? And if not, we'll, the Mike linebacker, whoever's got the green dot or whatever, will start like barking out adjustments. Well, now you've subtracted a guy from that count, and then you've added a guy back to that count. Theoretically, they can do nothing. They can not change their numbers and everything will be fine, but they still have to mentally process, oh, there's a guy down, my job has changed. Oh, there's a guy back up, my job has changed back. And nobody's allowed to screw it up. So just doing that gives them a whole bunch of opportunities to like misfit and screw something up and give up a nice run by not being in their position. And from the defensive perspective, it's really easy to screw up just by taking a beat too long to think about it. It's not, busting a coverage where you went the wrong way and now nobody's covering a gap and oh my goodness, right? It's just, I did get to my gap. I just took a little bit too long to get it. And that's the difference between a 3-yard run and a 6-yard run. And that's the kind of things we're trying to make. And hopefully over the long term, those kinds of things make for better runs. And I'm pretty sure if you did the like really basic just correlation analytics thing, you would find that like pre-snap motion leads to better run plays, right? If you wanted to like super reduce it down to that. And the other advantage here is we never really specified who is who is motioning out of the play, who's motioning into the play. That can be, taking Josh Oliver and having him motion and be the lead blocker, and then the guy on the backside could be Jordan Addison, who can't block. And if we have Jordan Addison, who was supposed to be in the play, we're taking him out and a corner runs with him, and then we're trading him for a tight end. The thing about it is, theoretically somebody comes with that tight end, but the guy who was going to be assigned to that tight end in the run fit might have been an edge rusher. He's not coming all the way across the formation. A safety is coming down, or maybe it's a smaller linebacker that's coming down, because when we motioned one guy out of the formation, that changed what side was weak and what side was strong, right? So somebody who is maybe aligned a little differently is coming outside, or maybe it's a nickel corner that's coming into the fit. Now we have Josh Oliver on a nickel corner. So there's a way to manufacture matchups based on this. And it makes Kyle Shanahan offenses really, really difficult for coaches to prepare for, because they have to figure out ways to change their whole run defense strategy to make it so that when Josh Oliver comes across the formation, we don't have our 5'10" nickel corner on him, because we'll lose that block every single time. He'll get just shoved out of the way, and suddenly it's like there's no defender there at all. And that's why these Shanahan run games have always been so good, even without like a really high quality running back, right? So I admit I kind of clickbaited a little bit with the title of this to make it about like, how are they going to get better even though they didn't have Dalvin Cook? But really, it's an excuse to explain to you your guide to the Vikings run game. But like I said before, we cannot go into the Vikings run game without talking about play action. Those two things are just part and parcel. We just cannot ignore that. So let's talk about how this sets up play action as well, and how play action sets up the run in turn, and really try to drive this home and kind of see how this whole offensive strategy is cohesive and designed to make defenders think a lot. Because if you're thinking on defense, you're losing, and that's the goal for the offense. Okay, so if you can imagine all of that motion, and if you've watched 49ers games in the past, you probably can, right? There's all kinds of guys motioning in and out of the formation, and across front side and back to back side, and there's all this stuff going on, right? You can kind of imagine how that plays into play action. You've got somebody running full speed from one side of the field to the other at the snap. I have a feeling that that's going to play really well into a certain family of routes. So that's part of it, is you just get a momentum thing. Hey, look, Josh Oliver, maybe not the best route runner. Now he has a head start, and that extra speed is going to help him potentially, get upfield a little faster, get out into the flat a little faster, whatever you need from this. And again, think defensively. If you see the fullback line up as the tight end, I'll call him the U. That's some terminology. A lot of this is from the Bobby Peters book about the Dolphins from last year. I highly recommend the Bobby Peters books, by the way. They'll just unlock a whole new part of your brain you didn't even know existed. But let's say you see the fullback line up as a tight end and then work across the formation. You might say, okay, well, that's something they love to do on run plays, and identify the run, and then roll out the other way. Bam, you got. There's one great play the Dolphins loved to run off of this. I know it as read rail. Bobby Peters' book called it soda. Same play. But it was a big staple for the Dolphins, who had they had Waddle and Tyreek Hill, right? Two really speedy receivers. So read rail. This is also in the Vikings playbook. They hit explosives off this all the time. It's a good play. But essentially you will have somebody motion across the formation, like call it Josh Oliver, right? Maybe it's CJ Ham. Doesn't need to be your best receiver. Just needs to be a guy that's motioning across the formation, and it especially works when he is motioning in a way that makes it look like a run play. And then he'll be your check down. And then you have two receivers on that side of the field that will run switch verts. So that's go routes, that's verticals, but they'll like switch on their release. They'll run past, kind of cross past each other, and then run kind of twinned verticals right there next to each other. And that's really good if you, say, are against cover 2 or a half safety, which is something that teams love to do against Justin Jefferson, right? That's a big deal that we've always been struggling with. Now there's one deep safety and two deep routes. So you've got him in conflict, right? He's going to have to commit to one sooner or later. You can throw to the guy he doesn't commit to. Or if it's a cover 3 situation, you will have one deep defender on that side of the field, a deep defender in the middle, who's going to have to like find his way, work his way over to that side. Or if it's, something like quarters cover 4, you've just got two deep routes and they're probably one-on-ones, same with man coverages. Either way, that's going to be your kind of idea, is that it's a shot play. However, teams are pretty good at 2 deep routes on the same side. Most coverages have some kind of answer to it. But what that usually does is, teams have, hey, if this guy goes deep, that guy goes, that defender goes deep with him. And they have all these different adjustments where if you see a guy going deep, you've got him, right? And everybody's responsible for every single person's deep route is covered by someone. And so usually that'll play out. Everybody's going to take their deep guy. You clear everything out, and then it becomes a catch and run play to your Josh Oliver. Again, doesn't have to be the most dynamic dude in the world, because a lot of times he's catching it with 10 yards of grass in front of him. Great. You just got a good gain. Great first down play, 9-yard gain, right? Or maybe he even gets a first down. When you have really, really fast dudes like the Dolphins do, that shot play thing can be extra lethal, and they hit that a whole bunch of times. Vikings hit it to Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen a lot too. So that's one play. And again, it's just like an example of how that works. So how you can kind of see how that plays into Zorro really, really well with, a guy, Josh Oliver, coming across to the strong side of the formation. So the defense will see that there's a whole bunch of receivers over there, and not necessarily immediately think this is going to be a shot play, because it also looks like the run play. There is a great George Kittle quote that I want to kind of wrap this out with. And I want to really drive the point home here that it's never been about the frequency of the runs. When you hear stuff about play action being said, the run sets up the pass, establish the run and all that stuff, there has been this dialogue for like 6 years now about it. Like Ben Baldwin's done a ton of work on this for various websites. But there's this thing about like, hey, the more a team runs their play action passes, there's not like a lot of correlation there. They can suck, they can get better, they can get worse. It kind of all happens. It doesn't seem like those things correlate. And I would say that that's probably true, right? Because the frequency of these things is not that important. It's the style of them. When you lump all runs together, all runs are not setting up the same play action, right? And so whether or not, your duo runs get a lot of yards, of course, that doesn't have a lot to do with the outside zone-based play action, but that doesn't make the thesis untrue. It's kind of answering a different question that not many people are asking, at least not anymore. So I want to drive home. It is not about the frequency of these runs. It's the shape of the runs. Defenses don't go, well, it's second down. And on second down so far, they've run 10 times and they've passed 5 times. So I think I'm going to play run, because that seems to be the tendency. That is not the thought process, right? The thought process that defenders have, they've got keys and guys they're watching. They're going, hey, Josh Oliver's going across the formation. That sure looks like their staple run play. Maybe I'll play run a little bit more. But really, the next level, because, these guys aren't idiots, right? If I know this and I'm a podcaster, defenses all have known this since college. Defenders have always known this. So really the next level is, they seem to be running that Zorro play a lot. And I know they love to do that read rail thing off it. I'm going to play it a little bit more conservatively. And that's what you want. Where now they've decided they're playing the run conservatively, and maybe you can get outside them if you play it particularly tenaciously. Or there's a thing. There's this great George Kittle clip that went around. It's from Kevin Clark's Slow News Day podcast on The Ringer, I think. And they did an interview with George Kittle, who was talking about this. And he said, there is this kind of tipping point you hope you reach, where if you can get them. And he talks about a Falcons game against the Vikings. It was 2014. Teddy Bridgewater's first official start as a Viking, by the way, where the Falcons ran the same run play that they kind of knew wasn't going to work against the Vikings front. And it was like 2 yards, 2 yards, 2 yards, a whole bunch. And they ran it a whole bunch. And it got the Vikings to really think. And this was, Anthony Barr, I believe Chad Greenway was in this game. Good players. And it got them to kind of think, all right, every time we see that, we're kicking that thing's ass. So let's get really confident in yourself about it. And that's when you hit them with the play action. And what the Vikings had done is not fallen for that. And the Falcons had run the play action off of that run play a whole bunch of times. This is Shanahan's Falcons, I believe. They had run the play action off of that a whole bunch of times. So the Vikings were then looking for that play action. And when they went back to the run play, they played it hesitantly, and they ripped off a 46-yard touchdown. That is the kind of mentality you want. You want it to be in conflict, whether it is run or pass, and these things can help each other a little bit. And again, I implore you to focus on the shape of these things rather than so much the frequency of them. Kyle Shanahan calls this unlocking the defense, because for the rest of that game, they were like really discombobulated, and they were kind of, every time that particular look was coming up, it's like, okay, well, now we got to overplay the run. And that's when you really get it, right? If you can really break one off, you can get them to like, oh crap, now we really have to, we got to take it seriously now. We can't play this play action as aggressively. And now you can hit them with the play action because you got them to back off it, right? And that's the ebb and flow of a football game. And then half the time things go the other way. So you're not going to really expect to see this show up when you take the entire sample of many years of data. You're going to have it sometimes that the pass established the run, and sometimes that the run established the pass, and it's this back and forth and symbiotic relationship that's really, really cool to understand on a granular level. And the best teams can make both things work for each other. Okay. Hopefully that was a manic enough crazy thing. I'm hoping I can do a Patreon someday that shows that stuff in more detail. But if you want visuals, drawings, whiteboard stuff, I again super recommend this Bobby Peters book. I also took a lot from just some Shanahan McVay playbooks that have been floating around in a Google Drive that's shared really, really widely. If you want it, send it. Ask me. I'll send it to you. LockedOnVikingsPodcast@gmail.com or at Luke Brown NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter. So I will see you guys all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.